All right, episode 30 of the Tool Bags of Sports podcast. I'm your host, Sebastian Caballero. Going to cover a variety of topics today, but we're going to start with college football. Big news came out last week. Florida became the first state to pass the new law that now NCAA athletes will be able to make money off of their name, their likeness, which is huge. Because that's the right that every college student has, right? If you want to be an Instagram model, you're able to brand off of your own name. So why can't football players profit when the universities are profiting millions of dollars? I don't think any of us are in any disagreement here with this topic. I got Sheehan and I got Hector with me today. We're going to talk and break this thing down. Obviously, we're all Floridians here. We are all fans of Florida football teams. We have all struggled at some point here in the last decade. The Canes have struggled. The Gators have struggled. My Seminoles are currently struggling right now. But obviously, a huge advantage here for us. I'm assuming more states are going to follow, are going to follow us in getting this bill signed as well. But we are the first state. How big of an advantage is this for us here in Florida?
Oh, it's enormous. I don't know how long this advantage is going to last, because I think other states are going to scramble to catch up to Florida. California and Colorado, their law goes into effect in 2023, and Florida's comes into effect in 2021. So they might have to expedite that as well, because there's no way it doesn't matter what state you're talking about. If it's a big state that has football, pretty much any SEC state, if Kirby Smart or if Nick Saban or if anybody, any SEC state is having any kind of negative experience related to recruiting, there's no way that the governor is not going to try to enforce this bill, try to speed it up to catch up. Like Nick Saban is not going to have a competitive disadvantage in the recruiting field. There's no way. So I'm glad Florida's ahead of it, but they better take advantage of it, because it's not going to last very long, I don't think.
Yeah, I think this is a good move. Obviously, it's about time that this has finally happened. Good move on for Governor Roger DeSantis. Like Sheehan said, it's not going to last long. I already know that the NCAA is already in the works of trying to get that deal done for everybody, but Florida is trying to push the envelope, trying to make them, speed up the process with them in putting this into effect July 1st of 2021.
So I was thinking about this earlier today, because now I think markets are going to play a role in this, right? Like most college football teams, like the really good ones, play in college towns, Tuscaloosa, you name it, right? So USC has fallen off the map here in the last couple of years, but they are in the LA market. I could see Miami even maybe beating Florida and Tallahassee and Florida State and some recruits, because they are a bigger market. There's probably more chances for these players to actually make a little bit more money. Do you guys think that this is going to affect at all some of these powerhouse schools that are in just small college towns? Do you think that has any effect with them at all?
It's a tiny bit. I mean, in my lifetime, I don't remember a college athlete being more famous than Tim Tebow. But other than him, I mean, Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush were legitimate celebrities in Southern California. So yeah, I could see other than take Alabama for example. I mean, who's been their most famous player? You probably aren't able to name them. You know who their good players are, but in terms of in the public eye, because it's Tuscaloosa, it's not really a big market. But if you're in Southern California, if you're in Miami, Miami's had really famous players. USC has had really famous players. So it's going to be, I think it'll affect it a little bit if you're in a big market.
Yeah, it's definitely going to help the big market programs. But that doesn't mean that smaller markets can still benefit from it. I mean, if you look at a few years ago, almost a decade ago, Johnny Manziel,
Oh, yeah.
lit up the college football world. and he was in Texas A&M, College Station. It's a big school and it's a big time program, but it's nothing compared to Southern California with USC and UCLA, and then Miami with the University of Miami. It's a different level, but Johnny Manziel was able to, benefit from being a small town player and then making himself this big brand because of the way he was on and off the field.
So you brought up a good name there, Johnny Manziel. We saw what happened to him. He's one of those few players that once fame got to him and money got to him, he kind of fell off. And that's the concern that a lot of people have with giving these players all these benefits, letting them compensate, because some of these guys are going to be making millions of dollars. Like, they're going to be making millions of dollars, especially if you find somebody like a Reggie Bush, like a Tim Tebow, that are celebrities already in college. So do you guys at all see this being a problem with some athletes? Could we perhaps, have some of these athletes that their money gets to their head and then ultimately they end up, not accomplishing, not reaching their full potential?
Oh, 100%. I mean, but more power to them. It's NFL, not for long. I mean, if they have a chance to make their money before they get to the NFL, I think more power to them. But it's definitely going to test some people. I mean, it's already tough to go to class when you're a star football player and you know that all your whole reason for being on the university is to play football. I mean, how hard is it going to be when your only reason for being at the university is to play football, and on top of that, you are a legitimate millionaire, or at least in the hundred thousands? I mean, that's going to be tough for a lot of people. You got to have the right temperament to handle this if you're a big star.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be kids that are going to have problems and not know how to manage their money and might even get into some trouble just because they have a lot more money than they probably have ever had in their life. But I do know that there are some programs, like I know at the University of Florida, they actually bring in people, like financial advisors and just different types of people that, they talk to the team. They go in the big team meeting room and they talk to these players about how, just like how to manage your money, what different things you need to do. And, this is a way that I know the University of Florida does. I'm pretty sure other programs do it as well, but this is a way for them to kind of like steer their players in the right way, because it's happened too often that so many guys, once they already get their money, they blow it all the way and they're broke.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely about time that this happens. Like I said before, if other college students are making money off of their name and likeness, and then why can't athletes? Like, what, especially when they're generating so much money to the university, they deserve to be compensated for their name, for their performances on the field, for who they are and what they provide to the universities. I do want to switch subjects here, and this will be the last topic that we talk about here today. You guys are also part of the baseball crew. We saw what happened over the weekend. I wanted to try to avoid this, dude. I'm so tired of talking about this, but there seems to be, some progress being made here. We heard that there was reports about a 60-game season. It seems like the owners are finally, willing to pay the full prorated rates for the prorated salaries for the players. Are we going somewhere finally? Could this be it?
I mean, I guess we're going somewhere. I mean, it went from being immobile to, I guess, like a tiny little snowball. But I mean, there was a lot of conflicting reports today. I mean, John Heyman came out and made it seem like the deal was done, and then Jeff Passan came out and said, it's just a conversation. But I guess it's a step. I mean, I think both sides are being very, very stubborn. Obviously, if I had to put the most blame on somebody, it'd be the owners. But Tony Clark isn't without blame here either. Like, he has to be a negotiator. He has to be willing to sit down, and he's just saying, no, it seems like they're in a diss battle on a playground. Like, they're both trying to just undermine each other, and Rob Manfred gets on national TV and just throws Tony Clark under the bus. Tony Clark releases a statement and throws Rob Manfred under the bus. Okay, I mean, I get it. You want to be the tough guy, you want to represent people, but you have to be able to sit down, like set your ego aside. And so I think they're finally starting to do that, which is good, I guess. But a wait-and-see approach for me.
I think a deal's coming soon. I think by the end of the week, we're finally going to have a deal, and we're going to have a plan for actually having a baseball season. Things are really starting. Just today, things have improved dramatically. When last weekend, Rob Manfred said that he wasn't 100% sure that baseball was going to happen. I'm pretty sure he heard all the backlash that he received, and that motivated him to really even push harder to get that season going. The latest proposal is easily their best proposal that they have offered yet. This was the details pretty much. 60 games in 70 days. Season would start on July 19th or the 20th. Fully prorated salaries. That's been the biggest issue, and the fact that they're finally starting to agree with the full prorated salaries is big. Expanded playoffs for the next 2 years, 2020 and 2021, and they would also be waiving of any potential grievances. So this is a deal that I think they should agree upon. I've heard that they might bump it up to 5 or 6 more games for scheduling purposes, but I think it's close. I think this is easily the best deal that the MLBPA has received, and if they're serious about baseball, I know the players want to play. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you can see all of them tweet when and where. I think now's the time for them to finally accept this deal and to hit the baseball field. I mean, there's already guys at the Marlins that are practicing at Marlins Park. So, I think they feel like they're close to being ready, and they're just preparing right now.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's time. It's time, and I think the only way that you could save baseball is just bring it back. I did have an issue with their start date. I know they were shooting for July 19th, July 20th. I think if they can try to get it done, a deal done this week, get to spring training, get started next week, and start the season July 13th, that would be ideal because it gives us a 2-week window where we would be in front of the NBA. We would still start before the NBA, but I just feel like the earlier that we start, the better it's going to be for the game. And it can maybe kind of like heal the wound that we've had so far. Because the last thing that you want is to start super late and then lose the rating battle against the NBA and then later down the road against the NFL. But really at this point, I agree with Hector here. I'm good with the deal, man. Like, give me 60 games. Give me an expanded playoffs. I'm good with it. Just put baseball back on TV for the love of God, bro. I cannot take this anymore, man. Brutal, man. Only so much Korean baseball that I can watch, bro.
Yeah, I think it's going to be extended from 10 to 16 teams, which means the Marlins might have a shot. We have all those prospects that are ready that I think are close. Maybe we strike while the iron's hot, and all of a sudden Cecil Sanchez is coming out of the bullpen, and you have Max Myers closing out games. Who knows? Maybe you get lucky.
Maybe we go 30-30 and end up with that 8th seed in the NL and get in, bro. Maybe.
28-32. Let's go.
Fellas, thank you for coming on. We'll meet up next week. Thank you, guys. Wow, I was really trying to avoid talking about baseball. God damn it. But, of course, the baseball fan in me had to bring it up, even if it was just for the last part of the segment. But just going back to college football, man, it's just such a big advantage to these Florida schools to get it approved for 2021. Florida schools, all 3 of them struggled here in the 2010s. Miami struggled. Florida struggled, even though they came up here towards the end. FSU struggled here towards the end. So it's a really, really big advantage for us to try to gain some ground in recruiting, especially for my Florida State Seminoles, who just got a new coach, who are now just the 3rd best recruiting team in the state of Florida. So, hopefully this moves them up in the rankings and can get us back on the map and can really get all Florida teams back on the map, man. So we'll see how that goes. All right, switching over to the NFL. I got Austin, I got Brendan Abbin from the KBR Sports Podcast, and Justin Garcia with us now. Very interesting times in the world, and I think that you're seeing a lot of new voices speak up and really, stand unified here to try to make a difference here in the world. And the NFL, obviously, a couple of years ago was highly criticized for having players such as Colin Kaepernick, which we'll talk about later, and Eric Reed, kneeling during the anthem, and they were talking about making it about the flag and all that stuff. Well, turns out that now you have coaches like Bill Bryan and NFL players like Baker Mayfield, like Kyler Murray, now coming out and already stating that they will protest the anthem. You would assume that the majority of the league feels the same way. But I wanted to talk to you guys because we've seen now what's happened with NASCAR banning the Confederate flag, how most of America, most of its fans are now boycotting NASCAR. There was threats before about people boycotting the NFL. How could you see this play out this season when the players already are publicly coming out like, yes, we are going to protest the anthem? Austin, I'll start with you.
I think it's very good that a lot of the players are open now to protesting the anthem. It started years back with obviously Colin Kaepernick, Eric Reed, and obviously Malcolm Jenkins, Kenny Stills, a bunch of players really like just holding down the fort and really continuing on with it, even when people were criticizing them, threatening them that they're going to lose their jobs and such. And it's really good that the whole league is finally catching up to them and backing them up finally.
Yeah, I probably say I think it's a big step for the NFL and its players because I felt as though a few years ago when it happened, there was a lot of different circumstances. I believe they were even in the midst of CBA negotiations of some sort, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of different things were on the table. So now, whereas where a lot more things are more settled, that the players are able to have more of the backing from Commissioner Goodell and so on. And the threat of, and when people, whenever people say we're going to boycott the NFL, I'm like, I don't believe you. I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't believe that on Sunday evenings, throughout whole Sunday afternoons, people that genuinely love the NFL are like, you know what? That asshole was taking a knee. I'm not watching that. I just don't believe that.
I'm not believing that either.
Yeah. So I think it's really good for the players that they're taking a stand for what they believe in. And I think it's a big step with Goodell coming out and speaking out in favor of that happening. And I think even the most notable thing being that Patrick Mahomes was a part of that video that the NFL released and a lot of the players released. Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson. Whereas a few years ago, I say if you were to talk about the biggest face in the NFL a few years ago, it was probably Tom Brady, where now it's Patrick Mahomes. So when you have the biggest face really taking that stand along with the other players, I think it resounds around the league.
I love it, dude. I love it. I see where it was a couple years ago with Kaepernick and where society was and where the NFL was, and he got ridiculed, and even me, I can honestly say I didn't understand. I thought it was a bad idea, but I'm a big believer in standing up what you believe in, even if everyone else doesn't agree. And now as time goes by, it's like, dang, like this is real. This is real. And to see everyone really come together. And so, where the NFL started this whole kneeling stuff, to now get everyone in on it, it's awesome. It's beautiful, So, and as for the fans boycotting, I mean, it is what it is. In the end of the day, it really is bigger than football, and fans or no fans, no one. And like you said, like Brendan said, I don't think fans are going to miss out on Sunday football. That's still the dominant sport. I don't think they're going to miss out on that. But, man, I think it's awesome. And the fact that before, when it was Kaepernick, I think a lot of people were as easy to say, oh, he's trash and all that. But now, he's bringing up that Pat Mahomes and we got some star players. It's good to see that. It's good to see all the players really sticking together, coaches, owners, Goodell. So I like it a lot.
Yeah, man. I mean, as far as the fans boycotting, like, I think NASCAR is a little bit of a different story because I feel like the whole Confederate thing is a really big deal to some of them, and they lost some fans. However, for me, that I've never cared about NASCAR, I think what they did was awesome, man. I think it's huge that they did that. And although I probably still won't watch a NASCAR race, like, I now support NASCAR, and I'm a fan of NASCAR, and I applaud them for what they did, which I feel like there's a lot of people that are on that same boat. With the NFL, guys, this is the most popular game in the country. I don't see any fans being pissed. You might be pissed off for a couple weeks. At the end of the day, NFL runs sports here in the U.S. It runs your Sundays for 17 weeks out of the year. You're going to end up watching. You might lose a handful of them, but either way, it's not going to be big enough to affect anything going on in the NFL. And to your guys' point, I think the biggest part about the kneeling compared to back in 2016 is that now everyone is on board. Everybody's unified. Like, okay, we understand. We get it now. You get me? Now you have guys like actual, people that have a voice, like Drew Brees. Even though after his comments, regardless of his comments, like now he's on board. The way he went and he defended his stance against Donald Trump. The way that Baker Mayfield has now come out publicly and said it. Like you guys mentioned with Goodell, that's huge. Because they're letting you know, like, no, man, we demand change and we stand with our brothers together. And I think that's what's going to end up making the difference. Let's talk about the person who did start this back in 2016, which is Colin Kaepernick. There's been lots of talks. We've seen Malcolm Jenkins come out and say the NFL's got to do right by Cap. There's talks about there's teams interested in signing Kaepernick. We saw Pete Carroll come out and say that the team did contact him about Colin Kaepernick. Do you guys see him signing at all this season?
Honestly, I think they owe it to him. They owe it to him, man. The NFL really, dragged his name through the mud, and so did the media. So if he wants to play, I think he deserves a shot. Or, I think he did. Like, I would love to see him be in shape, and he's got all the talent in the world. You know what I'm saying? If to be honest, I think he's got what Lamar Jackson has. Colin Kaepernick is super fast. He's got a great arm, all that, and I could see him being a good backup. But, I hope he's ready. I hope he's ready, and he does want to compete, and I think he could help a team. I don't know if it's a starter, but I think if there's anything, man, believe it or not, I think the NFL, owes it to him.
But wouldn't that be an issue, though? Like, him being that's my only thing. Like, he's such a figure now that would he be able to accept, not only, he might be able to accept the backup role, but how would that work in the locker room with the person that's a starter? Because now he's not the most iconic quarterback in the locker room. You got what I'm saying?
No, I mean, it depends which teams want him, and I that's why I say the Ravens, because I think he could bring that same skill set that Lamar Jackson has. And I don't think Kaepernick's taking Lamar Jackson's spot, but I mean, if Lamar Jackson gets hurt, I would want someone with the same skill set so it wouldn't have to change the entire offense, So that's just off the top of my head. Maybe a Seahawks, but that's just what I can think of right now.
Yeah, so going off of what you said with the Ravens, I think they still have the same offensive coordinator as last year, and that was the same offensive coordinator that Colin Kaepernick kind of strived into the league with, and pretty much built that entire offense around how Colin Kaepernick plays, similar to Lamar Jackson. So what you're saying about the Ravens is great. But I think a quarterback-needy team like the Patriots or maybe possibly Jacksonville, but, I mean, he's going to be there competing with Minshew. Those are top two landing spots for him. I heard some news about the Chargers earlier today, but I don't see the Chargers as a good spot because they already got Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert. And then the Seahawks, he can be behind Russell, but I think he wants to come in and actually make a difference in the league. I don't think he wants a backup role.
Well, the interesting thing is that I feel as though in most cases, whenever people have talked about Cap, and he said that he doesn't care whatever role he would have to fill into. He would just do whatever it takes to get back into the league, and he just wants to play football. And when we're talking about the teams that really he would be the best fit for, a lot of those teams, honestly, I don't know if the situation as a whole from the fan base would be the best situation. So, for example, Texas is normally a conservative state, but we're talking about him possibly backing up Deshaun Watson, or a guy like Dak Prescott, depending on whatever Dak Prescott does, because both of those systems, you need a mobile quarterback to really maximize on what those systems bring to you. But obviously that's when you bring in how does the fan base react to that. But I feel as though that's where you really start to ask the questions, okay, if we were to poll the teams that he most likely fits behind a certain quarterback role, like the Arizona Cardinals, where you can fit behind Kyler Murray, like Austin said, the Seahawks, even though they passed on him a few years ago, a lot of these teams, either the situation might not be the best situation for him from a fan base standpoint, or they already have a young guy there with a backup. Like the Ravens would have been perfect, but they technically already have RG3. So I think even though he's been out of the game for X plus amount of years, there are backups that still get rotated around in the league, and those guys haven't even seen a field for years. So I think if a team really wanted to sign Cap, they would have done it already. I think they think about all the extra things that come with it, kind of like how you noted earlier. If a guy is going to come on my roster and be a bigger name than the starting quarterback, could that possibly be an issue? And it's kind of the same predicament that Cam Newton's in, and Cam Newton doesn't even have the same amount of baggage because of the fact that the fan base wouldn't hate you if you signed Cam Newton. The fan base might turn on you if you sign Cap. So I think those factors, me personally, I think it'd be tough for him to land a job, especially since you could look at a guy like Cam Newton, who's now said, I'm willing to take a backup role, and is in this, they kind of fulfill the same role.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only team really that makes sense to me, I just don't see him being a backup. And I don't think I would bring him in to be a backup. Cam is one of those that he would have to fit with the right team, right? Like if he would have gone to New Orleans, he has Drew Brees playing in front of him. He needs to have like an icon playing in front of him. And then it's not a big of a distraction. But with Kaepernick, it does not matter where he goes. He will be the primary focus regardless of where he goes. And I think it's a problem. I think the one team that does make sense is maybe Jacksonville because they need the attention, right? Whether it's good or bad, they just need attention. They need the publicity.
That's what we were saying with Tebow a couple years ago.
Exactly. So that's why I think that one would make sense. But again, I just don't see it, man. I don't see how that's a good move. I would rather go after Cam. If you're really looking for publicity, go after Cam. It's a safer signing. And Cam's just played, a couple years ago. Yeah, he played 2 games last year, but he missed the rest of it with injury. But I think you get the same thing. It's if you're the Jaguars and you sign Kaepernick, which if you sign Cam, you get the publicity or whatever, and you don't have to deal with the extra baggage. Do want to switch over to the NBA because the NBA has also been very vocal on this matter, and then some NBA players are now talking about saying that it might not be the best time to start the NBA season again because of these issues, because their main focus should be on the cause, man. And I think Avery Bradley was the one that said, the whole point, I get it, NBA coming back is important, but he said, if it doesn't come back, the world will see that the NBA isn't the same without black players. He does have a point. But do you guys agree with that? Is it really a bad time to bring back the NBA season?
I think it would. I don't think it's necessarily a bad time, but I think it would, depending on how you go about it, it would take away from the topics that we normally see being generated on the normal news cycle right now. So where we're seeing a lot of the Kaepernick conversations, we're talking a lot about should the NBA come back because of the players trying to be involved in social justice reform. It'll go all of a sudden into talking about, will LeBron win his 4th ring? Will Giannis be able to solidify himself with his first championship? Or what are all these different circumstances? Or whatever player might test positive for COVID-19, those topics will become more of the forefront. So I do think I understand where the players are coming from when they say it could be a distraction, but at the same time, not playing would just, the way it would set the league back in the same sense that you're trying to fight for reform and so on. You fought to get to this point, and the players before you have fought to get to this point. So for you to kind of blow it away, and when you can still make an impact with your platform, with the money you make from playing in the league, I mean, they would lose billions of dollars, and the league would be able, the owners would be able to use force majeure on them and essentially break out of the CBA. And that would just, I mean, as we see with the MLB, if you have to go back to negotiations, that's just tough. So the NBA, I think they should come back. It's a tough reality to think of what it would look like if they didn't.
I mean, I get it, and I respect it, and I understand that is the number one priority. they need to keep their foot on the gas with everything and the protests and, and getting their word out. But, I mean, what are we really doing? I mean, like, you fought this long. We sat out this long. We've gone this far in the season. And now you want to uphold, and we're going to talk about, the social issues. I mean, I don't know who said it, but he was saying, yeah, but not everyone got paid like Kyrie and Avery Bradley. You know what I'm saying? Not everyone got that money. And there's people here who still need to make a paycheck every day, and are grinding. People are still competing, trying to win a ring. People who are not getting any younger. So it's like, are we sitting out really? Like, I mean, NBA players have the strongest voice, in my opinion, in all of sports. All of them, and they've always been very vocal, and they're very strong. And so I know that, yes, the news will turn a little bit to the NBA and all that stuff, but I don't think the NBA players are going to take the foot off the gas of all the stuff that's going on outside of basketball. So it just kind of seems like it seems kind of funky to me. I mean, maybe I'm just desperate for the NBA to come back, but it just seems like bogus, and it's always, I mean, it's coincidence, but it seems like always Kyrie Irving is always up to like something, and it always seems like
that attention, man.
It's crazy.
It's like
I feel like the whole country is pretty much dying for sports to come back. Major sports like baseball, basketball, football, anything. Just they want something to have, something to watch. And with that being said, why not play? And you're gonna be interviewed through Zoom calls, whatever, after post games and stuff like that. Why not use that to really vocalize your message? Try to get all those things you want to get out there for the social justice and stuff. Like, I feel like that is probably one of the best things that could happen for the players who really want to get involved in the social justice movement. I feel like this is probably one of the best things to do, because they are going to be the focal point of every sports fan.
So, although the social issues, there is also another issue here, with not wanting to come back. And I think for me, it would be a pretty big deal is the whole idea of playing inside of a bubble, right? Like having to stay in a hotel for 2 months or however long it may be. What doesn't make sense to me is that you're asking these players to stay in hotels and, kind of quarantine themselves in these hotels, but the workers that they're going to be, around aren't taking care of themselves. The people that they're going to be around aren't taking care of themselves. So it's like, what really is the point? And I guess that never made sense to me. It did make sense to me at the beginning, but you're seeing these sports, like if baseball comes back, they're going to be at their own parks. Football is going to be at their own parks. Everyone's playing at their own stadiums except for the NBA. What are your guys' thoughts about this idea of playing in a bubble for 2 months, essentially, if you're a team that's going to end up going to the finals?
I mean, it is what it is, and at this point, I think we and even them are just trying to just get it done. They've come that far in the season. It's almost over. It seems like maybe the safest thing, but at this point, it really is what it is.
I think I understand the concerns, because I think for a lot of guys, some players might be more at risk than others, even though we're talking about human beings that are at like the peak of human athleticism. But if you're an at-risk player and you're like, okay, I don't want to be in this situation, that's where I do understand the disparaging voices, and I understand how they feel as though I'm putting myself in this situation, and you're pretty much telling me I have to isolate myself from my family, from my friends, whoever else. And let's be real. I mean, we're on this, at least on this particular podcast episode, we're men. So you're not going to see any women in there. Like there's not like these are NBA players. So you're secluded from you're just around the team all the time. Whereas you normally had a break from those guys in some form or fashion. So now it's just like, I feel as I understand why there's some trepidation. And I know Justin was coming from my man Kyrie, but look, I understand this is Kyrie's job though. I know Kyrie's normally the guy that has to play the other side of the fence. He always ends up being the guy, the flat earth person. But since he's the vice president of the NBPA, he has to normally speak up on issues like this. And I don't even feel like I totally disagree with him when he's talking about these things, because when we're talking about that bubble and you're secluded in there for X amount of time, and you have to. They're talking about you only have 35 people per team, and the normal resources that you have accommodated to you for you to play and be at your best, your peak, is now limited. I understand if some players have that trepidation and don't feel as though is this the best environment for us to come back and play in.
Brendan, real quick, also before you go, so Kyrie had mentioned something like literally a week ago or a week and a half ago. He was for getting back to to play to get the season underway, and then it seemed like once they told him and KD like you guys aren't gonna play, you guys aren't coming back, then he kind of changed his opinion. Like, is Kyrie? I don't know, man. Like for me, I just feel like Kyrie's kind of just doing this for attention a little bit.
So I saw a story that a lot of players felt like, and I even heard an interview with Enes Kanter. I can't remember if I heard him on the Herd or where I heard him at, but he came on there and he was talking about, well, nobody talked to us about this decision to come back, and that a lot of players have honestly felt that with Chris Paul as the president of the Players Association, that a lot of the under average minimal players are the ones that kind of get overlooked in all this. And it's more about the stars. Like the initial reports, like when all the momentum was coming for the NBA to come back, we heard about that call that LeBron, Giannis, Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, all those guys were on, but then all the under players, they kind of get left in the brush. So I understand if maybe Kyrie was in those initial conversations to let's bring the league back. And then the other guys, because that's his job, he has to listen to those other players too. And those other players are like, we're not being heard. And you're going to hear these grumblings. If you're the vice president, you're going to hear these grumblings. And so he has to represent those players. And so I understand where maybe he might, and normally people, you can get new information and then change your opinion in line with that new information if more details come out, because they just released this 113-page health and safety protocol for everybody in the Orlando bubble. And I think one of the funny rules, even Adrian Wojnarowski noted, was that players can't even play doubles in ping pong. And that's like how serious it is for the COVID-19 regulation. So I think as new information comes, if your opinion changes, you have the right for that to change.
Austin.
All right. As my thoughts for the bubble, I think it's kind of like cool, having all the players there to kind of build up camaraderie, kind of like a summer camp vibe. But just this fast track to Kyrie, what he was like saying, like he's like pushing for the league to come back, and then now he starts talking about how we should form our own league, and I kind of like confused with where his head is at, don't know exactly what he's trying to get across to not only like the fans of the game, but just his teammates and everyone else in the league.
Austin, you mind if I respond to you real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is where my thought process was when he said let's start our own league. So you know how we even talk about artists and music, right? As a music artist, you try your best to stay independent. I think if most artists could and they had the money to, they would stay independent, as opposed to signing up a big corporation or a record label, and now they have the title to your masters, all this stuff. I think what Kyrie was saying, especially in this climate, was, hey, these guys are making money off of us. Why don't we make a league where we help each other, bring each other up? Because this league is predominantly African-American. So why don't we start a league where obviously we're the ones, it's like we're feeding back into our communities. These owners that are majority white, we don't know if they're feeding back into our communities, whereas we know we would be doing that, and we're the talent. So why don't we make something of our own, kind of like starting your own business, even though I know the whole league is definitely, we've seen the startups, we've seen the XFL, the USFL, like it's tough to do, but I think that's where his head is at when he was saying that.
Yeah,
it just made me a little.
Go ahead.
It just made me like a little salty because I know where Kyrie's like head is at, and starting his own thing, making our money, looking out for small black businesses at the arenas and in the black community. But I felt like it was kind of just a slap in the face to like the owners. I feel like some of the NBA owners are really good owners. And I feel like the GMs there are really good. The coaches, I've been always for the NBA. Like I said, the voices of the players are very strong. These guys say things, it gets done. It's no back and forth. So I feel like it was like Kyrie saying that left me a little salty because, like, damn, like I know everyone's been very good to Kyrie wherever he's gone. And he's gone his way everywhere. So it's kind of like him wanting to do his own thing. If I'm maybe the owner of the Nets is like, dang, like this is the guy I brought here to come lead my team, and they want to go and do their own thing. It's like,
true.
So that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah. I definitely feel, though, like how you said earlier with like the XFL and the other startup leagues, I feel like if you get big star players like Kyrie and his bunch of his friends that he can probably put along with him, I feel like it will have a way more success than these startup leagues that kind of like are like the lower divisions of like the NFLs with the XFL and stuff like that.
Yeah.
All right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. I appreciate you guys coming on for that. And we'll see you next week. Brendan, thank you for joining us, brother. Again, guys, this is Brendan Abbin from the KBR Sports Podcast. Make sure you check him out. Where are you at, man? You're on SoundCloud. You're on everywhere, man. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, KBR Sports Podcast, Brendan Abbin. Brendan, guys, see you next week. Pretty solid episode right there. Thanks to everyone who jumped on the pod. Shout out to my boy Brendan from KBR Sports for coming on and talking some NFL and some NBA. Don't forget to check us out as well. Don't forget to like our episodes, rate our episodes, subscribe to our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and our YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us also on iHeartRadio. We are on iHeartRadio now. That's all from me. Until next time, I'm signing out.